Hey, here we are again. Welcome everybody back to the Fixed Ops Mastermind show. We are joined with three special guests who I will get to in just a moment. But first, I want to thank our sponsor. This week's show is brought to you by Parts Edge. Your parts department is the backbone of your dealership and is responsible for nearly half of your total profits, according to NADA. Our system works within your DMS for a hybrid approach that combines the precision of automation with the nuanced decision-making of parts experts. Thank you, Parts Edge, for your sponsorship. And now, our guests. We have first Joe Clementi, Vice President of Service Operations for Mobility Works. We have John Traver, CEO of Traver Companies. And Scott Beal, CEO of IV Automotive Management. So Scott is a former dealer. He is a best-selling author. John, I got to do this to you. He is the grandfather of the automotive BDC. Somebody called me the great grandfather of virtual fixed ops events the other day. So I only gave you grandfather.
Thank you. Yeah.
And Joe Clementi, a great leadership, thought leadership expert in the area, was once in the dealership space, now still serving dealership communities and things through Mobility Works. Mm-hmm. So, gentlemen, thank you all for being here. Today, we will be talking about leadership, and we're going to take ourselves through three segments. Segment one is going to be what is a leader? We'll go through that and get everybody's opinions on that. Segment two, what's successful leadership look like? And I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say about that, because everybody has a little bit different idea of what success looks like and what successful leadership looks like. And it's definitely not all the same. And lastly, segment three will bring us all home with developing new leaders, what we have to do to help and make this industry better. And so we're going to start out and get everybody's definition of what leadership is to you, and has it changed over the years? Is it different than how you used to view it? I will tell you personally, my view of leadership is way different than the first store that I took over. And you can go and talk to a lot of those people, and they will tell you they did not have a good time with me as a leader. So my opinion and my definition of leadership has certainly evolved. And so, John, we're going to start in the middle with you.
Yeah. So the question is, what is a leader? Is that right?
Yeah. What's your definition of leadership, and if it has, how it's changed for you over time?
Yeah. Okay. So let me just first say this. If you'll allow me to say it this way, I love definitions of leadership. There's quite a few of them that I've heard. My favorite is this: leaders lead. Leaders lead. And the reason I love that is because A, it's memorable. It's easy to remember. I look at where I'm at in my career, and I'm just talking to somebody here internally a couple hours ago, and we were on this topic. And I said, where I see myself in leadership is a sophomore. I do think it's a journey. I don't think you ever arrive at a place where you have this fully encapsulated. But I think the question itself implies how we lead. I think it begs direction. So leadership requires a clear direction. I think it also probably requires our ability to communicate that direction, our purpose. And then it gets to the people in terms of equipping those people. Are they resourced? Do we have the right people? I can think of good leaders and bad leaders, Dave. I think Nick Saban is a great leader, and you don't have to like Alabama football to see why. He leads young men. He was tough on some of these guys, probably all of them. But to me, what I walked away with in the snippets that I saw with Nick was he cared deeply about his people. He was flexible too. He didn't have a one-size-fits-all. Jim Jones, the cult leader, back in the late 70s, I think it was 78, 55 to 78, he led people to their death. He led. but the direction is clear. So I think there's great definitions, but one who leads with that right direction, with a care for its people, has transparency. I think those are some things I look for quickly in leadership.
Great perspective there. And I love the dichotomy there of of somebody who can be a technically great leader, right? But is led the lemmings over the cliff, so to speak. So appreciate that. Scott, over to you. Same question. Definition of leadership, and has it changed?
Yeah. First of all, we're talking about what is a leader. I would, in my opinion, I would say it's someone who's they're unselfish for the betterment of the team. They set the pace and expectations, and then they help and encourage the team to reach those goals. Leadership and how it's changed. I'd say a good leader is he or she is a visionary who leads the way, but strongly communicates well to everyone who's following them. I think too many times I've seen where leaders get so far out in front that they forget that the people who are following them are really the gap is too far. And I think a good leader understands that he wants to set that pace. He wants to get out in front. He wants to make sure he's clearing the way for his team, but he's also looking back, if you will, and walking with his team to make sure they understand exactly what that mission is, and he's able to communicate what that mission is, and then that management team and everyone underneath them understands on a daily basis how to go out and make that happen. And to me, I think that's what makes a great leader, and that's what makes a successful organization.
Yeah, that's some excellent points there, Scott. And again, the dichotomy between a great leader leading well and understanding that maybe you have gotten too far away from the team, right? Maybe understanding that is why the team can't follow you, because they can no longer see you because you put too much distance between you and the team.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's good to have that. I think it's good to have that vision, right? It's good to have that vision and be that leader who's out there. But I think you also have to understand that if the gap gets too big and you're talking about something that's down the road and they're not even getting to where they are today, unfortunately, you do have to take a step back and get your arms wrapped around your people and say, hey, let's take a look at what are we doing on a daily basis? What are our daily habits? What are our processes? And let's execute on those things and do those really well. And then we can start to establish how to gain momentum to get to where the leader actually wants to get to.
Yeah, that's great. I read a quote yesterday that said, if you're a leader and you turn around and nobody's following you, you're not a leader. You're just out for a walk.
Correct.
So true.
Right. Joe Clemente, let's round it out with you. Your definition and has it changed over the years?
Yeah, so my definition is a leader is somebody who not only has the mental horsepower for themselves, but they're able to multiply that leadership. And by using assessments and stretching other people to their own potential, that's really what leadership is. I envision it like a talent gardener. They're responsible for caring for that garden and nurturing people so that they can become the person that they're intended to be, so that they can bring their inherent talents to the whatever profession or whatever area of the business it is. For me, I really believe that leadership is coaching, and there's such a bad connotation to the frame coaching, but John used the coach, the greatest coach, right, as a reference point. And Nick Saban does really well is he balances challenge and support by fostering an environment where individuals can live to their own strengths, can build to their own potential. And I'll say lastly, relative to my view of leadership, yes, it's definitely changed over the years. In the past, it was, command and control, do as I say, only follow this process. Today, though, it's different because you have diverse cultures, you have multi-generational groups working with you. And in today's workforce, especially millennials, they want a coach-like leader. They want someone who's going to provide clear expectations, like both of the experts have said, provide accountability, responsibility, but more important than anything, provide ongoing feedback, ongoing growth, and an ongoing strategy so that that person can become the person that they are intended to be within that culture of that environment. That's my assessment.
I love that. And so you took us perfectly into one of the quotes of the week. I usually do stat of the week. I usually do one stat of the week. I did two because I found two that I found impactful. And Joe, you just led me right into this one. So here is your first quote of the week. And that is 63% of millennials believe they aren't being fully developed as leaders by their employers for management positions. Your stat of the week, first stat of the week, is brought to you by Parts Edge. And so that's a staggering number there, 63%, right? And when you start to dive in and think of all the times that you hear, oh, millennials don't want to work. They don't want to work. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. But I think you hit on it, Joe. They're looking for a different leader. Right? They came up in a different age than probably all four of us on this stage right now came up in. And you need to be able to adapt to that, right? It is not for other generations to adapt to our incompetence. It is for us to adapt to what they need to
This is the first time in history, Dave, that leaders are managing this many generations in the workplace. It's the first time ever where you have all different types of generations with all different perspectives on how they want to be led. Yeah. Leadership in and of itself is understanding how to tap into the best potential of that person. So they're delivering on the mission, the intention, the purpose, the goal, the within the culture of that organization. If you can't do that, right, to your point earlier, you're walking by yourself. You're leading no one.
Exactly. So, John, on that theme there, from your business, you get a range of people and ages that are coming to be BDC agents for you, and you need to be able to effectively or teach your teams how to effectively manage those people and lead those people. And they all have the same end goal, right? They all got to get that appointment, right? But how do we get there, and how do you work with your teams and the vast age differences in there?
Well, I just first need to say, Joe, you spoke that last piece like a true coach. That you really did. How do we do that? There's three things we're battling at all times. I think any leader would admit it's either fog, fatigue, or flirtations. Bob Beal taught me that. Scott, I don't think he's a relative of yours, but Bob Beal was a mentor and a friend to me for many years. He was on the board of directors at Focus on the Family for 31 years with Dobson. Worked with Peter Drucker. I mean, he's a unique individual. But Beal shared that with me many, many years ago. And so how we do that, whether our leaders are young or they're experienced, number one, I think we start with a mentality of, what they're leading. And we help bring clarity. I think clarity comes from measurability. So we try and measure what we do. We try and clear that up going in. Otherwise, everybody's guessing. Nobody wants to disappoint. So we do that. We do that with scorecards. And we work hard at paring down the content in that scorecard. Less is more, as you guys know. So how can we get very specific about what that looks like? we interact with that environment and then the results of that work on the regular. And so that provides confidence. And, I think confidence is a byproduct of predictability. Again, back to what do you want me to do? How do I do that well? How am I doing? And that volley just builds momentum, Dave. And so that's pretty much how we do that. So we want to eliminate the fog. And the thing is, you can't go fast when it's foggy. Got it?
Right.
I mean, you can't, and no matter what kind of car you're driving, you can't go fast when it's foggy unless you're willing to wreck. Fatigue, what did Lombardi say? Fatigue makes cowards of us all. So when people are worn down, maybe the tasks that we're giving them, so we look for that. How do we simplify this process? How do we take steps out? And then flirtations. What I'm talking about there is, I'm not talking about promiscuity. I'm talking about getting outside of your lane to a point where now we're playing with a whole new idea that doesn't even fit our mission. Scott, Joe, I know you guys have seen this. You've probably been in that seat where you're like, hey, wait a minute, what am I doing here? This isn't even, this wasn't the first mission. So balancing innovation with flirtations, it takes some wisdom, and you got to have the right leaders around you. So that's how we do it, Dave. We stay close, we stay measurable, we create clarity, we create measurability. We're aiming to create confidence in those leaders. And hopefully we're transparent as we do that.
That's great. That's some good information. I love the 3 F's that you have there, and certainly gives a good framework for everybody to be able to understand.
There you go,
Scott. Moving over to you, going to shift gears a little bit, and so whether in your current position or previously as a dealer principal, what were some of the most impactful decisions you had to make, whether those were tough decisions, easy decisions, or maybe tough on the team?
Sure.
What I'm trying to get to with this is I want people to understand that leadership is not easy, right? A lot of people look at leadership and they go, I want to sit in John's office. Look at Lee, he's got a nice office there. That's where I want to sit. But we all know as leaders, you're facing tough decisions, right? And you've literally have people's lives hanging on your decisions their livelihoods. So that's what I'm trying to drive at with that question, Scott.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I would say, any position of leadership, especially when I had a couple stores and had a few hundred employees, every day I would get up, I would think, the decisions I'm making today affect 300 families. I mean, that could be, 1,000, 1,500, people. So I always tried to make, the best decisions for the organization. And what I will say is, when we are leading people, I think it's important, when a manager would come to me and they'd say, hey, this person's not working out. I think we need to let them go, and for these reasons and whatnot. The first thing I would always ask them is, are we letting them go because it's a knowing problem or a doing problem? Mm-hmm. And the reason why I'd ask that question is because I would go down the route of, with my managers, look, did you train these people properly? Did you lead them properly? Did you make sure they were equipped to do the job that you hired them to do? Did you make sure that they were following processes? Were they trained, to the utmost, to where they absolutely knew what they needed to do, and then they chose not to do it? And I would put it back on the manager to say, look, when we're letting this person go today, I mean, you're going to affect this person, you're going to affect their family, you could be affecting other employees if the person was well liked. This is a big decision to let this, employee go. And I want to make sure that if it's a doing problem and we've counseled this team member time and time again, and they're just choosing not to do the work, not to follow our processes, they're completely unengaged in the process of learning and unengaged in the process of following direction, then yes, we need to let that person go, and that falls on that person. But if it's a knowing problem and we didn't teach that person properly, we may still let the employee go. I get it. But I'm going to have a really good sit down with that manager to make sure that it doesn't happen again, because if it was a knowing problem, I'm going to put it back on them.
Yeah, that unfortunately far too often we see that, right? Where it's a knowing problem and somebody loses their job because of it. I was just having a conversation with my son yesterday, and John, I know you met my son. We were just having this conversation yesterday about somebody, and I said, well, they can't, that person can't be let go and have it be a complete surprise to them. Like, they have to
Right.
know it's coming.
Right.
Nobody, unless you were stealing, nobody should get fired if they didn't see it coming. Right. And I guess if you were stealing, you should see it coming anyways at some point. But, as far as job performance, whether you have the skills or not, nobody should be blindsided by that if we're doing our job as leaders. And so, Joe, I want to take this question to you also, because at Mobility Works, you've got people that are really dependent outside your outside customers who are really dependent on the vehicles and the products that you deliver. And so same question there. What are the impactful decisions that you're having to face?
I really thought about this question a little deeper, because I think the most impactful decisions for me personally are the ones that change behaviors, not opinions. And to Scott's point earlier, if we're going to change a behavior because it's going to affect the impact of someone's life, it's going to affect their career, it's going to affect how they connect with one of our valued clients, then I need to understand, did we change the behavior or just opinion? So if an opinion is this person can't perform, but we don't understand the underlying issues, or perhaps we're not allowing them to live into their own talents, then it's a behavior thing. And that behavior is, how are we looking at how they contribute? How are we looking at the way that they make their own decisions? So for me, the most impactful ones are when we get people to think about their behaviors rather than just trying to change an opinion. And I look a little bit deeper in the context of fostering a culture where everyone's valued, where that input is really important to the overall structure of how we care for our clients.
Yeah, I love that, Joe. A great way to look at it. And so now let's be real with the people out here that are watching, right? Well, let's talk about some failures that we have had, and what we ourselves either learned from it, or what somebody else who's trying to come up as a leader and doesn't want to make those same mistakes can learn from it. And Scott, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Man, biggest failure, what can I learn from it? There's been plenty for sure. I think for me personally, I know that, when you're in the thick of things and, you've set an expectation, or the factory has, on certain metrics and KPIs, and you're really focused on those numbers, and every meeting you're talking about numbers. I think me personally, I probably spent too much time talking about numbers and not enough time coaching growth. And what I mean by that is, when we're going through that process of chasing those numbers each month, each quarter, each year, I think it's important that through that process that we are setting aside time to actually have great coaching moments with our management team. The management team we have is doing the same with their staff and employees, and down the line there. I think that too many times people don't see coaching as something that's necessary or a great tool for their organization. They think, okay, we're going to train. And I talk about this in my book, where, there's a lot of organizations. If I go into a store to do some consulting work, and I'm talking to the CEO and I'm going through and, tell me about your training. And man, they are on top of training about processes like there's no tomorrow. They can tell you how to sell a car, write a service order a part, they F&I, whatever. They have everything down the line in their processes. But I start to talk to them about coaching. And what I mean by coaching too is talking about how to develop a person's personal growth and transform that into their career growth. Are we talking about those things to make them a better person overall, so they want to come to work, they want to perform, and on top of that, they're loyal to the company for a long period of time, and you don't have as much turnover doing that, which results in, of course, less turnover, higher profits, better CSI, and everything that goes with it. So to me personally, I think that's where that's where I ended up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's terrific. And John, I'm gonna come over to you for this. Biggest failure, and what can we or others learn from it?
Yeah, I think back to when I started Traver Connect. I had Traver Technologies in 91. I sold it to ADP in 2000. I thought I would stay a few years. I stayed 10. So it's 2010. So at that point, I have 20 years of business development under my belt. And I see this void in 2005. I went to ADP executive committee. I said, guys, I really think we need to have something around service. They said, it's really not our sweet spot. And so, okay, I left in 2011, started Traver Connect. There's a ton of data on the inbound side. I wanted to do outbound. Most of what I thought was accurate in outbound, Dave, was no longer accurate. The mobile phone had impacted most of those events. And so, as I look back on that and what we were leading people to do, what I was leading people to do, we had to pivot quickly. So I like what Scott just shared. Whether we're relating to a new initiative, a new product, a new leader being appointed, I think the biggest failure is typically not learning from a mistake. It's general, but it's true. Mistakes are opportunities to learn, but repeated mistakes say that we don't care as leaders. So that's the key. I think credibility is a result of being, basically being humble and just saying, hey, gang, I really screwed that one up. And I thought this, and can we get a reset here where you guys, are we okay? And then off and away you go. So that's short version, but it's close to the vest and it's true.
Yeah, that's certainly a big learning point is to be humble, right? To realize that. Go ahead, John.
I just want to add that for those that are listening, we had a meeting with a manufacturer here this week, and they're here because of our outbound initiative, because of how much traction it gets. So, I mean, it came a long way, but there's the payoff. Joe Link, you sat in the meeting. I mean, there you go. So it does pay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But looking back, you don't get that meeting yesterday if you weren't humble back then, right? Because you would have
and being surrounded by the right people and the right people. I mean, it's not really just me. I mean, it's really the sum of a bunch of people, but fostering an environment where you can make a mistake with the caveat that we all agree that we're going to watch and we're looking for the best idea. And that's the idea that wins.
That is a great way to look at it. The best idea, no matter who it comes from.
That's it.
Love that. All right. Quick break for our quote of the week. Quote of the week brought to you by Parts Edge. And it's: a leader takes people where they want to go. A great leader takes people where they don't necessarily want to go, but ought to be. Again, brought to you by Parts Edge. Thank you so much for bringing us that. John, that ties into what you just said. You've got to be humble enough to realize when you have made a mistake, to be able to correct that mistake and help lead the team through that, and help let the team be the one, right? You're driving through the fog there, John, right? It's not always you that has the fog lights. Maybe it's one of the team members that has the best lights in the fog, and you need to let them use that. So, all right, we are going to move on to segment 2, which was successful leadership. And Scott, you just touched on training. Brad Lee, if anybody doesn't know him, you can look him up on Instagram or whatever. But he says training is not something that we did; it's something that we do, right? And that Scott, you kind of just touched on that. Training isn't always the answer, right? It is something we should always be doing, but it isn't always the answer, right? Training, it can help the issue that we're facing, maybe move us closer to a goal. But how do we evaluate whether that training is actually impactful and is whether what any individual within that team actually needs? Joe, we'll start with you on this.
Yeah. So how do we identify whether it's what we need? Is we first ask better questions, right? And I'd like to change the narrative from the word training, because training means we train dogs, but we develop people. The subtle nuances are really important to the narrative, at least in my humble opinion. And as we develop people, as we anchor learning, growth, as we get them engaged, the byproduct of that is the measurable results. The byproduct of that is how they begin the ideation process, how they bring innovation into the environment, how they take an existing problem and they look at it with a different set of lenses, how they approach challenges as a result of becoming a more well-rounded, informed leader. And I want to go back to something Scott said, right? We get all the skills in the automotive world. And as I talk to leaders throughout the automotive environment, we have that training, we have this training, we have that training. Those are all fundamental to business success. But the one element that's really missing, and I love the fact that Scott brought it up, is the development of people, is actually developing their leadership skills and teaching them how to multiply that throughout the organization. You have one leader leading, ultimately, the outcome are only a result of one leader, where everyone else, all the decisions are being made for them. And they're not really able to contribute their best, not able to add their perspective, their insights, their talent, their creativity. You know, John said, you know, when you think about all the people that are involved in making a good decision, they all have input. When they have input, better results come, right? When different people ideation process is better, everything as a product or a byproduct of that are just simply better results.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it. Scott, I'm going to jump over to you and same theme, but on the training and development of people that you brought up. How do we actually evaluate whether somebody can be a leader? Because the reality is not everybody, and I'm not saying that a leader is born, right? I do believe you can learn to be a leader. I was certainly not a good leader the first opportunities I had, but not everybody is cut out to be a leader. And so how do we evaluate whether they are somebody or not?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dave. One of the things that I would do, whether I was interviewing on the outside, but 100% absolutely I would do if there was some sort of promotion going on internally and I was interviewing candidates for that internal promotion, and everyone kind of knew the basic, interview questions, if you will, maybe what was going to be asked, but the kind of, I wouldn't call it a trick question, but it was a question I asked every single time was, let me ask you, what are you doing outside of work that has prepared you for the opportunity to lead people in this upcoming position? And the reason why I'd ask that is because I want to know, what books are they reading? Are they motivated to learn? You know, are they listening to the right podcasts? What are they doing outside of work? Because if they're only relying on the workplace to grow as a person or as a leader, you're just not going to get there. So if they've taken the initiative to take classes and online classes and go to, you know, conferences and things like that to learn from, you know, the Brad Lees, the Grant Cardones, whoever it might be, and they really have you know, put themselves in a position for the next level, then those are the people that I was looking for.
Yeah, that's I love that interview question. That is one everybody should jot down and add to their repertoire. So John, let's stay with this subject and move to you. Because over the years you have certainly developed your fair share of leaders. And I'm sure you've come across some that just weren't going to make it. So how did you evaluate that?
I loved this. This is my favorite question you had queued up for us. I think it's a great question. Point blank answer. My experience at this point, this stage of my career has taught me they will have led previously, Dave. Okay. Now, what may surprise you is how far back. I've learned to look back, Dave, as far as the playground. Like if I'm interviewing you, if you remember, you and I had a conversation one time, and I literally asked you about grade school. You remember that?
I certainly do.
Yeah, because on the playground, so if you didn't lead on the playground, does that mean this person's not a leader? No. But if you led on the playground, I know there's a leadership quality sitting there that started very early. What does that look like? Typically, if you played to play and be part of the group, that's a team member. If you were the person organizing it, you may or may not have been the best participant, athlete, etc. But that's another picture. It's wild to see those traits in people for me. The second thing I would say that I've learned is it's very important when you get on this topic in a larger audience to edify team members that are not per se leaders by build, how they're bent. Okay. And here's why. If you're the world's greatest leader and the rest of us on this podcast are team members, you do understand your job is meaningless unless we execute, right? And so to me, as a leader, I will say that to the audience. You know, this is a great idea, or this is to our teams. Look, I'm just one guy. And this idea is DOA unless you guys can execute this. Together, if we all can grab an oar, if I can create and this guy can develop and this gal can drive it and execute, guess what? We're going to win. We're going to make some progress. So to me, it's be careful about A, too much shine on the leader. B, everybody leads at some level. You lead yourself, right? And then C, there are tenets of leadership that go way back. And what you want to do is you want to figure out if they've led before, and then figure out how you can leverage that.
Yeah, that is a great point of leading before, and again, part of a conversation I was having with my son again yesterday was about the fact that the leader may not be the one holding the title, right? We all hold titles that say we are the leader, but you may not hold that title, and there may be a strong service advisor that is way more influential with the other advisors or in the shop than you are as the leader, and you need to be able to identify that in some way, shape, or form.
Great example.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and so Joe, give you a chance to weigh in on this same thing. So how do you evaluate whether somebody is equipped to lead or a person who could lead?
Yeah, so I haven't met Scott before this, but the question I ask any new candidate or someone that wants to lead, I always say, how are you investing in yourself? Relative to your career, where are you investing in yourself? And in the context, it could be if you're an avid reader, perhaps you attend seminars, perhaps you're an avid TED Talk watcher, or you are, what are the areas that you're investing in yourself in? If you attended an event, maybe you've trained, been in a training environment, and then ultimately, what did you get out of that you can multiply? And then I take a little bit of the element that John had, which is leaders ultimately don't have a title per se, right? Just because you have a title doesn't necessarily mean you're a leader. So leading is really being able to multiply that and get others to do and bring their best to a situation. And it, like you said earlier, David, just because you have a service manager's title doesn't mean your service advisor isn't a leader. They actually may be a better leader because they can influence the outcome. And that influence is where that power is. And as soon as you can recognize that in an individual, where they can influence the behavior change and really drive results, that's when you give that person that opportunity. That's my feedback.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. I want everybody to notice a theme there of all three guests kind of going the same way, right? You're all looking for those qualities in a person that would indicate this is somebody who could lead. This is somebody I can pour into to allow them to flourish and to become a leader within my business or somebody else's business. But be able to help them move forward. All right. Encouraging creativity or creative thinking to continue innovation. And innovation doesn't mean designing the next, supercar or anything like that, right? We all have things that we have to innovate within our business. Innovate's a very universal word. But we're talking innovation in the form of making our business better. And so how do we do that as leaders? What are the best ways to help people creatively think so that our business can continue to evolve and innovate? And Scott, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, thanks. No, a couple of things come to mind when that question comes up, and I look back at the 35 years I spent in the car business and sitting in meetings, whether I was an attendee or the leader of the meeting. And some of the best meetings that we would have is what I'd call the roundtable meetings versus me sitting at the head of a conference table meeting as a leader. And I think sometimes, whether it's myself as a leader or I would turn the meeting over to maybe someone else to have, and I would say sometimes you need to just be a moderator at a meeting and get some discussion going and make sure that all titles stay outside the door. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk about innovation. We're going to talk about creativity. We're not going to crush somebody's thought because they said, hey, this might work in marketing, or how do we drive more traffic to the service drive? And, a sales manager comes up with a fixed ops promotion. You don't want everybody in that room kind of rolling their eyes like, why is he talking about fixed ops if he's a sales manager type situation? So, one of the things that comes to mind especially is, the Steve Jobs quote, right? Which is, I didn't hire smart people so I could tell them what to do. I hired smart people so they could tell me what to do, right? So I think it's super important to open up, not always, but make sure that you know it when you're going into that meeting where you say, hey guys, we're having a roundtable meeting today at 10 a.m. and make sure that every time you say that, the group that's coming into that meeting understands exactly what that means. And you might bring in, and you guys have done it, you might bring in a porter and one service advisor and your receptionist, or what, it could be a couple managers with a few people and really let them speak and tell you what's really going on in your store. And if you can get that, and you'd be surprised at how many great ideas that come out of that. And going back to the leadership, how many times you've been in that meeting and you didn't even realize this porter is more of a leader than every service advisor that you have in the store. And he's so quiet, but he gets in this meeting, comes up with this great idea, and then you put it on his plate to go downstairs and execute, and he does. And you're like, wow, this is amazing, right? And how good does everybody feel when it gets executed under those circumstances? So for me, I think that's the key right there.
Yeah, that's great. And I love those moments when it's the unexpected person that comes up with something. When I started this Fixed Ops Mastermind back in 2019, one of the things that I was saying as I was trying to generate support for it was whether you had 4 months or 40 years in the industry, your voice was wanted and needed, and you had something to say. Right? Sometimes we need fresh eyes to look at
Right.
things.
Yeah.
And to show us what has been under our nose the entire time.
That's right.
John, creative thinking.
Yeah. I think by asking questions. Questions drive dialogue. Questions imply something. What do they imply? They imply that your opinion counts. Right. And that's where you were just going. The
Yeah.
key to asking these questions that I try and coach to with our leaders is I just remind them, hey, when you're asking, are you asking to reply, that old adage, or are you asking to understand? You got to check it at the door. Scott, I see you nodding your head. You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's just, so the key is their opinion does matter. It does. It could tell you everything you need to know. You just got to just disarm and listen. Questions, by the way, and that doesn't mean we're going to use that idea. It doesn't mean we won't. So I think in a good team, everyone goes in with the knowledge, Dave, that the best idea wins, like I said before. And the reason that's the case is because I'll say to them early, I say, look, it's not about me. I could care less if we pick a single idea. I'm just trying to help us win. And so we all bring our best. And the other thing is, don't feel like it has to end up completely on you. It's about the organism in the middle of the table we call our company. You're an owner. And so all we're trying to do is keep the roof over the head and the meal on the table and tend to the people that we tend to well. We want to do this well. So that just seems to allow people to exhale and then to get in the zone of, okay, now let's get after it. Let's come up with the best way to do this. Ego is checked. That's how we drive innovation and creativity.
Excellent. Ego is checked. That's a big one. It's a small word with with a whole lot attached to it.
Joe Link, our National Director of Business Development, is sitting in on this. I mean, he sat in a week of this just this week. I mean, he'll tell you that's everybody here's got a voice.
That's awesome. All right. So we're getting ready to go into segment 3 of developing new leaders. To take us into that, we are going to do our other quote of the week, brought to you by Parts Edge. Companies fail to choose the candidate with the right talent for the job 82% of the time. If that stat doesn't kick you in the face, I don't know what will. So we talked about recognizing leaders, developing leaders in the previous segment. We're talking about developing leaders in this final segment, and 82% of the time we make the wrong choice. And so where are we failing our current leaders, right? Because the root of the problem with poor leadership is the fact that we probably put them into a leadership position before we gave them the necessary tools to be a leader, right?
Mhm.
Your master technician in your shop doesn't come walking into your shop with no tools. He's got a giant toolbox of everything that he or she needs to make the repairs on that vehicle. But we send leaders into battle with zero training, zero tools most times. And so once they get in there, it's harder to make those corrections. It's harder to get the time with them to get them to understand things. So where are we failing our leaders? What do we need to do to start to correct this ship? It's a big ship. It's going to take a long time to turn, but we can do it. And Joe, we'll start with you on this.
Yeah, thank you. I'm passionate about this, as you know, because we fall short all the time in developing and supporting our leaders by neglecting their development early on in the process. So many people are promoted solely on their current abilities without adequate learning and development to grow into their existing or their required abilities. And the tendency for that is to say, hey, Scott's really good at this job. Let's put him into the next level. And we don't develop them. We don't spend the time, the resources, and the energy and the revenue to develop their leadership skills. And they only know what they know. They don't know what they don't know. And so that dichotomy, if you will, is, hey, they were good at this, so they ought to be good at the next level. And it underscores the importance of how the proper education, the proper development of an individual, the proper coaching, and the proper environment for them to learn and grow into the kind of leader that supposed to be or can be. I always say it's growing them to their potential. And we're neglecting that early on in the process. I really feel firmly about, if you get them early enough in their transition, or even a newly developing manager, and you spend the resources, you're going to get tenfold the results. The byproduct is exponential.
Yeah, that's a great take on it. And so, John, share with me, or share with us your thoughts on this.
I think of the word clarity first, because if we're leading and we're developing a leader, we're going somewhere. Where are we going? Nothing clarifies like measurability, like I said earlier. So is their role clear? Are the expectations clear? Is all of that in front of them? Are they engaged in all of that? And if those are yeses, then guess what we're going to know? We're going to know where the gaps are going in. You're going to know, right? They're going to literally say, that one I'm going to need your help on. So, what I would say to the audience listening to your show is, I would say, ask yourself how often your organization visits and scores these areas for feedback. There's a great book. It's 15 years old. It's called Who. And you may challenge yourself to read that book. Much of it applies to what we're talking about in terms of getting the right people on the bus, the old Jim Collins comment, and then in the right seat. But this is how to do it. I've watched one organization, if I said their name, you guys would know who I'm talking about, but I've watched them double in size. They have thousands of stores, and they have done extremely well. And I know the executive team, and I asked them recently, I said, guys, what is going on? And they literally cited Who. They said, have you read Who? And I said, yeah. And they said, scorecards. We just have it clear for everybody. We score them quarterly. Here's how we do it. But you can tie your compensation and rewards to it. Essentially what you're doing is the old red, yellow, green. Coach Joe would tell you this, something similar, I think, because I've heard him talk about it before. But, green is good. It's 8, 9, or 10. Yellow is 6 or 7. Red is 1 through 5. And you can't get to the Super Bowl unless you got an all green team. And I think that's where we're going as we lead. We're trying to win, whatever that is. So, Dave, that's my take.
It's terrific. And that book is now on my list.
Awesome.
Great book.
I'm still
Good.
working through Scott's book, and had another book delivered yesterday, and now I got another one. So I need more hours in the day to just read, I guess. Scott, let's talk to you about top qualities of a leader. I'll tell everybody mine: honesty, empathy, communicates well, they're positive, and they are an expert delegator. I think delegation is one of the underrated skills of a great leader. And so, Scott, take us in with that.
Yeah. So a couple things come to mind for me. Is one is that they have to be a good visionary. I like to say, they need to be able to go from boardroom to showroom and back to the boardroom every single day. They need to be able to address the things they need to be able to address at the top, and also communicate well to the people who are actually doing the work. But one thing I want to mention that, again, I talk about in my book that is extremely important is mentorship. And I think too many times, if we want to promote someone, say in the service drive to an upper position, we always kind of, partner them with someone and say, hey, can you kind of mentor this guy for a week or two and make sure that they understand, the lay of the land. But how many times do we do that with our manager staff, right? So what I mean by that is, if a service advisor gets promoted to service manager, is the GM in that store or your fixed ops director, are they really mentoring that person for that role? And on top of that, I always like to say, from a mentorship standpoint, you should always have a mentor and you should always be mentoring someone else. And by doing that, it'll create the flow of people becoming leaders and moving up the ladder, if you will, within your organization. And then everybody wins at that case. And I don't think we do enough of that in the dealership world, where we really have strong mentorship, where there's some great one-on-one meetings that are going on that are help building people up. So as you're getting built up in your position, you're helping the person below you get built up to take over your position.
Yeah, that's terrific. I think that there's a lot of fear around that in automotive, probably in a lot of industries. But the fear of, if I impart all my knowledge and wisdom on the person coming up, that person is going to take my job. And to me, if they take my job, good for them.
Yeah, good.
Right?
Yeah.
That's
Good.
That's good for the organization.
Well done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I have done my job.
Yeah.
You want it, come get it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And listen, at the end of the day, your success as a leader should be determined by how many other leaders you have created.
Yes.
Right? Not necessarily by how much gross profit you drove, but how many other leaders you created, either for that business or other businesses.
That becomes your legacy, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely. Something everyone should be proud of. Anybody who has developed somebody who has become a leader, that is something to be really proud of. And so we're coming into the last couple of minutes here. So this is a long question that we need quick answers for. So Joe, we're going to start with you. How do we make this change? It's an industry of a 30-day cycle, right? But we need to have a way to make this change. Couple of things we can do.
All right. So you said earlier, it's like trying to turn a big battleship in a kiddie pool, right? It's going to take time. And so I look at it as a two-pronged approach. We got to shake up the whole idea, the whole notion of what learning and development really is, especially as it relates to leadership. And then lastly, we got to understand what our measurables are, and then what that means in terms of impacting the people around us, and ultimately as it correlates to the growth of the business.
Excellent. Scott?
Yeah, I would say, we need to focus on the processes and daily habits. I think too many times we say, hey, we want to make $30,000 gross per day in fixed ops, as an example. And at the end of the day, you go, as a GM or owner, you're like, hey, how much did we make today? The questions we should be asking is, how many appointments did we have today? How many came in? How many did the processes drive the traffic to the store that allowed us to get to the gross profit that we need to get to? And if we can focus on that, we'll get to our number at the end of the week, end of the month.
Terrific. John, take us home.
I would just say, as you choose who you partner with, who you work for, fly with eagles, right? Pick your team, talk long-term development. Incremental improvements have to happen too, obviously. So not everything can be just long-term, but you're looking for compounding effect type environments, and you'll listen to leadership that has that. Find one that wants to grow, can grow. It's going to commit to, as Jim Rohn used to say, meaningful progress in reasonable time.
Terrific. All right, everybody, we are at time. I want to thank Joe Clemente, John Traver, Scott Beal. Thank you. Grateful for your time here. I know the industry is going to get the the ones that watched it live, a ton of knowledge out of this. This will be replayed Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it is also available on demand. Anybody that needs the link can reach out to me. I am easily found on LinkedIn, and I will get you that link so you can watch that anytime. Definitely a show you should be playing with your teams to help them grow. Next week, we're talking remote service, and we have Jim Sabino, Jeremy Stevens, and John Schmidt. So going to have a great show, a lot of great knowledge coming there on remote service, something that is big in the industry and a new way to help serve our customers. And so with that, another thank you to our sponsor, Parts Edge, and we will see you all next week.
Obsessed with creating the perfect inventory? Us too. Parts Edge gives you the tools you need to outpace the competition and provide the highest level of service to your customers. Parts Edge is a powerful tool for parts managers to get the job done faster. Imagine what it was like when the impact wrench arrived. It made mechanics 3 times faster. Getting the job done without the latest technology makes it difficult to keep up. Besides all the other responsibilities you have, you work hard to have all the right parts you need when you need them. Parts Edge was designed by parts people for parts people to make that job a lot easier. Parts Edge saves you 4 to 6 hours every week and can increase your sales by 10 to 20% in just 12 months. Not bad for your bottom line. Take your obsession to perfection with Parts Edge. Call us today to find out what Parts Edge can do for you.